Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving deep into proteins. You know those tiny molecules that do way more than just fuel your gym sessions?
Right. They really are the unsung heroes of the body.
Definitely. We're going to be looking at some excerpts from pasted text that a listener sent our way, which really digs into protein lab values. Those numbers you get on your blood test, yeah, those. We're going to decode what they actually mean.
It's interesting, isn't it? We always hear about protein for building muscle, but these tiny guys are actually involved in almost everything our bodies do.
Oh, absolutely. I'm already picturing like a tiny construction crew bustling around inside us,
Yeah.
repairing cells, fighting off invaders.
I love that. And this source emphasizes just how diverse those roles are. From speeding up reactions to transporting nutrients, they really are the ultimate multitaskers.
So before we get too far, let's start with the basics.
Yeah, good idea.
What exactly are proteins? I have to admit, my science classes are a bit of a distant memory at this point.
Well, imagine them as these big, complex molecules,
Yeah.
kind of like the VIPs of the cellular world, made up of building blocks called amino acids, all linked together in these long chains.
Okay, so kind of like a chain of Legos, but each one has a special function.
Exactly. And the way those Legos are arranged, that determines the protein's specific job. Some proteins actually form the structural components of our cells, like the walls and scaffolding. Others act as enzymes, speeding up chemical reactions.
Right.
And still, others, like those antibodies, patrol our bodies, defending us from invaders.
Wow, that's a pretty impressive resume for a simple molecule. No wonder our bodies work so hard to keep those levels in check.
Exactly. And that's where those protein lab tests come in. They give us a snapshot, of what's happening in your protein world.
Okay, so let's talk tests. This source you sent mentions a few common ones. Total protein, albumin, globulin, and then there's urine protein.
Yeah, those are the big ones.
Can you break down what each one is actually telling us?
Sure. Let's start with total protein. That gives you the big picture, kind of like a head count of all the proteins circulating in your blood. Think of it like taking inventory of your protein workforce.
Okay, so the more the merrier. Like more proteins mean a healthier me.
Not quite. It's not just about the quantity, it's about the balance. What do those numbers actually tell us? So within that total protein count, there are two key players, albumin and globulin.
So it's like subcategories, subproteins.
Exactly. Now, albumin is the most abundant protein in your blood. Think of it as the workhorse, constantly on the move, transporting hormones and nutrients and even medications throughout your body.
Wow, busy guy. So if someone's low on albumin, could that be why they're feeling like sluggish, like their delivery system is kind of backed up?
You got it. Low albumin can definitely lead to fatigue because your body's struggling to deliver those all-important nutrients to your cells. It can even cause fluid buildup because albumin helps maintain the proper fluid balance.
Wow, so those low albumin levels can really have a ripple effect, huh?
They can.
Okay, what about globulin? What's its role in all of this?
Globulin is more like a specialized task force, primarily involved in your immune system. Your antibodies, your frontline defenders.
So if someone's globulin levels are high, does that mean their immune system is working overtime, maybe fighting off a cold or something?
Exactly. High globulin can indicate an active immune response. It can be triggered by anything from a minor infection to a chronic inflammatory condition.
Got it. So we've got total protein, the big picture, albumin, the workhorse, and globulin, the immune system's special forces. Now, what about that last one, urine protein? That one seems a little different.
You're right, it is. This test checks for protein in your urine, which shouldn't be there in large amounts. It's kind of like looking for leaks in your filtration system.
Filtration system, you mean like...
Yeah, your kidneys. Think of them as your body's filtration system, constantly filtering your blood, getting rid of waste products and excess fluids while holding on to the good stuff, like protein. But if those kidneys aren't working properly, protein can sneak through. And that's when it ends up in your urine.
So finding protein in the urine, that's like a red flag that something's off with those kidneys.
Exactly. It's a crucial clue, especially for folks with diabetes or high blood pressure. They're at higher risk for kidney problems.
This is fascinating. It's like we're piecing together a puzzle, and these protein levels are the clues. Okay, so we've got these different tests, each looking at protein from a different angle. But what are we actually looking for? What are considered normal levels for these tests?
Well, the source gives some typical ranges, which can be helpful as a starting point. For total protein, it's usually between 6.0 and 8.3 grams per deciliter.
Grams per deciliter. Can we translate that into something a little more user-friendly?
Sure, think of it as a concentration, like how much sugar is dissolved in your lemonade. A higher number means there's more protein circulating in your blood.
Okay, that makes sense. So for total protein, it's usually between 6.0 and 8.3, those units of concentration. What about albumin and globulin?
Albumin typically falls between 3.5 and 5.0, and globulin usually hangs out somewhere between 2.0 and 3.5. And for urine protein, ideally, you want to see less than 150 milligrams over a 24-hour period.
Okay, so those are the numbers to aim for, but I have a feeling it's not quite that simple, right?
You're right, it's not. It's important to remember those are just guidelines. What's considered normal can vary depending on your age, your gender, even the specific lab that runs the test.
Wait, really? So you're saying even something like someone who drinks a ton of water, that could actually make their protein levels seem lower?
It can. Remember, we're talking about concentrations. If someone's overhydrated, their blood volume increases, and that dilutes the proteins, potentially skewing the results.
Wow. So many factors to consider. It's like a delicate balancing act. Even seemingly small things can tip the scales.
You got it.
Huh?
And that's why it's so important to talk to your doctor about your individual results.
Yeah.
They can help you interpret those numbers in the context of your overall health.
Okay, so we've got the basics. What proteins are, how we measure them, those normal ranges. But this is where I think things get really interesting.
I know, right?
These protein levels, they aren't static. They fluctuate, like the stock market of our bodies. So what are those fluctuations telling us? It's like a medical mystery, and we're here to uncover the clues.
I love a good mystery.
Me too. All right, so we know those protein levels can bounce around a bit, but what's the story behind those fluctuations? Why are those numbers doing the cha-cha instead of just staying put?
Well, like with so many things in the body, it all comes down to a delicate balance, right?
All right.
And this source gives us some great starting points for figuring out why those levels might be shifting.
Okay, lay it on me.
One of the biggest culprits is something we can all relate to: what we eat. Our diet can directly impact those protein levels. Makes sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So someone who's like constantly pounding protein shakes at the gym, they might have higher levels.
You got it. A high protein diet can definitely bump up those numbers.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, if someone's not getting enough protein, maybe they're following a very restrictive diet or just not able to access enough nutritious food, their protein levels might dip below that normal range.
So it's not just about how MUCH we're eating, but also the quality of our diet.
Exactly. And whether our bodies are actually absorbing all those essential nutrients.
Okay, so it's kind of like being a protein detective, huh?
You got it.
We got to track those proteins and see where they're going and what they're doing.
I like that. You're thinking like a true detective.
Yeah.
Now, let's shift our focus to another key player in this protein mystery: the liver. Remember, it's the main production site for albumin.
Right. Our protein superstar.
Exactly. So if the liver isn't functioning properly, that can directly impact those albumin levels.
Okay, so if the liver is having a rough day, those albumin numbers might take a hit.
Exactly. Things like cirrhosis, which can impair the liver's ability to produce albumin, will show up in those levels.
It's like if the factory's down, production goes down.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Now, let's not forget about the kidneys. We talked about them filtering waste, but they also play a critical role in regulating protein levels.
Right. Those kidneys, they're like the bouncers of the bloodstream, making sure everything is where it's supposed to be. But what happens when those bouncers aren't doing their job?
Well, if those kidneys are damaged, they can actually start leaking protein into the urine.
Oh no, it's like a leaky faucet, dripping those precious proteins right out of the system.
A perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And that protein loss can definitely lead to lower levels in the blood.
Wow. So we've got diet, we've got liver function, and now kidney health, all playing a role in these protein levels. Anything else we need to factor in?
It's amazing how even seemingly small things can impact those delicate balances in the body.
Like what?
Well, believe it or not, even something as simple as hydration can affect those protein levels.
Really? So you're telling me if I just like chug a gallon of water, that could mess with my protein test results?
Not quite that dramatic, but yes, hydration levels do matter. Think about it. If someone's dehydrated, their blood volume decreases, right? So those proteins become more concentrated.
Ah, okay. It's like shrinking the container, but the amount of stuff inside stays the same.
Exactly. So it might look like there's more protein, but it's just an illusion, really, just because it's more concentrated.
Wow, so many things to consider. It's not just about how much protein we're taking in, but also how our bodies are processing and filtering it, and then even how hydrated we are.
You're getting it. It's a complex system, and that's why it's so important to look at those protein levels in the context of your overall health. They're just one piece of the puzzle, but they can offer really valuable clues about what's going on inside your body.
Mhm.
So are you ready to tackle those abnormal levels? We've got to figure out what those numbers are trying to tell us.
You bet. Let's crack this case wide open. All right, so we've talked about those fluctuating protein levels, but now let's dive into what it means when those numbers are truly out of whack. First up, high protein levels. What's the deal with that?
Well, think of it this way. When those protein levels are soaring, it's often a sign that your body's in defense mode, like it's rallying the troops for a big battle.
So we're talking about inflammation, right? Like when you have a cold or something and your immune system kicks into overdrive.
Exactly. Chronic inflammation, whether it's from a condition like rheumatoid arthritis, a persistent infection, or even something like an autoimmune disease, can trigger this surge in protein production. It's like your body is sending out a call for reinforcements, flooding the system with proteins to fight that perceived threat.
Ah, I see. So those high protein levels, they're like a signal flare saying, hey, something's going on here, but is it always a bad thing?
Not necessarily. In many cases, it's just the body doing its job, right? It's trying to protect itself. But sometimes, those elevated protein levels can point to something a bit more serious. Remember that multiple myeloma we talked about earlier?
Oh, right, the blood cancer affecting plasma cells.
Exactly. In that case, the high protein levels are a direct result of those cancerous cells, just churning out abnormal proteins. It's like a rogue factory, producing faulty products that disrupts the body's normal processes.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so high protein levels can be a sign of both good things and bad things, depending on what's causing them. What about when those levels are too LW? What kind of red flags should we be looking out for?
Well, one of the most common causes of low protein is something we've already touched on: malnutrition. This can happen for a variety of reasons, whether it's limited access to nutritious food, an eating disorder, or even certain medical conditions that just interfere with digestion or nutrient absorption.
So it's not just about how MUCH food someone's eating, but also the quality of that food and whether their body can actually use those nutrients.
Exactly. And just like with those elevated protein levels, liver disease can also play a role in low protein levels. Remember, the liver is the main production site for albumin, that workhorse protein that helps transport all sorts of things throughout the body. If the liver's not functioning properly, it just can't keep up with the demand, and those albumin levels plummet.
So the production line gets stalled and the protein supply dwindles. Makes sense. What about kidney disease? We talked about how damaged kidneys can leak protein into the urine. Does that factor into those low protein levels too?
Absolutely. Those leaky kidneys can lead to a significant loss of protein, causing those blood levels to drop. And in some cases, kidney disease can even impair the production of certain proteins that help regulate fluid balance, making things even more complicated.
So it's a double whammy. You're losing protein through the urine, and your body's ability to make and retain protein is compromised. Definitely not a good scenario. Okay, so we've got malnutrition, liver disease, and kidney disease, all potentially contributing to low protein levels. Anything else we should add to our suspect list?
Well, we can't forget about those sneaky infections. Both acute and chronic infections can really throw a wrench in the whole protein production process. When your body's busy fighting off an invader, it might shift those resources towards that immune response, and sometimes that means other processes, like protein synthesis, might take a back seat.
Ah, so it's like your body's saying, okay, we've got a bigger problem to deal with right now. Protein production can wait.
Exactly. It's all about resource allocation. And again, that's why it's so important to look at those protein levels, in the context of someone's overall health. They're just one piece of the puzzle, but they can offer some really valuable clues about what's going on inside your body.
This has been so insightful. I'm really starting to see these protein levels differently now. Less about numbers on a lab report and more like a conversation with our bodies. Like they're revealing all these secrets about what's going on beneath the surface.
I love that. It's like a secret language we're learning to decipher.
Exactly. And to help us translate, we need a really skilled interpreter, someone who understands those subtle nuances.
And that's where our doctors come in, right? They can look at those individual results, consider our medical history, lifestyle, all those factors, and really help us make sense of it all. So, if anyone listening is thinking, maybe I should get my protein levels checked, our advice is simple. Talk to your doctor.
Yeah, that's always the best first step. It's like having a health detective on your side, someone who can help you unravel those clues hidden within those protein levels. Well, I think we've done it. We've solved the case of the mysterious protein levels. What's our final verdict?
The verdict is clear. protein levels matter. They're not just some abstract numbers on a lab report. They can offer incredibly valuable insights into your overall health and well-being. So pay attention to those numbers, talk to your doctor, ask questions, and keep learning about what your body is trying to tell you.
That's a great reminder. It's all about being proactive and advocating for our own health. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of proteins. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.
You've been listening to the Learning Podcast, a production of metaNESTA. Remember, learning is a journey, one step, one insight, one skill at a time. We'll see you next time. Keep learning, stay curious, and as always, be awesome.